Daniel Crawford kissed his mistress goodbye at the Miami airport, laughing at something she said, his hand still warm from holding hers. He had spent 7 days in the sun with another woman, while his wife sat alone in a hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning, holding their sick child's hand and making a decision that would destroy everything Daniel thought he owned. He didn't know it yet. He was still smiling when he landed in Seattle. He was still smiling when he unlocked the front door. And then the smile died. If this story hits close to home, subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The house was dark when Daniel Crawford pulled into the driveway. That was the first thing he noticed. Not the silence, not the emptiness, just the darkness. Every window was black. No porch light. No glow from the kitchen where Claire always left the range hood on at night because she said she hated coming downstairs to pure darkness. That small yellow light had been burning in that kitchen for 11 years of marriage. 11 years, and tonight it was off. Daniel told himself it meant nothing. Claire probably went to bed early. Noah was probably asleep. He was tired from the flight, a little hungover from the goodbye drinks he and Victoria had shared at the hotel bar before he caught his cab to the airport, and his mind was still half in Miami, still warm, still easy, still uncomplicated in the way his real life never was. He grabbed his carry-on from the trunk, rolled it up the front path, and punched in the door code. The lock beeped, the door swung open, and the silence hit him like a wall. Not quiet. Silence. There is a difference. Quiet is when people are sleeping, and you can still feel them breathing somewhere in the house, still feel the weight of other lives moving slowly in the dark. Silence is something else entirely. Silence is absence. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment longer than he should have. Claire. Nothing. Noah. The word fell into the house and disappeared. He flicked on the entryway light. Everything looked exactly as he had left it 7 days ago. The console table with the ceramic bowl where they dropped their keys, the framed family photos on the wall, the stairs leading up to the bedrooms, everything in its place. But there were no small shoes by the door. Noah had a habit that drove Daniel crazy. The kid would kick his sneakers off the second he walked inside and leave them right there in the middle of the entryway where anyone could trip over them. Daniel had told him 100 times to put them in the closet, 100 times, and every single time Noah forgot, and the shoes ended up sideways on the floor, laces still half-tied, smelling like a 10-year-old boy who had been running around outside all afternoon. Tonight, the entryway floor was clean. Daniel told himself Claire had finally gotten through to the kid, told himself she'd made him put the shoes away, told himself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this, the darkness, the silence, the clean floor, and that he was being paranoid because he'd been gone a week and he felt guilty, and guilt made everything look like evidence. He wheeled his suitcase to the foot of the stairs and walked to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator. It was nearly empty. Not the kind of empty that happens when you've been away for a week and things have run low. The kind of empty where someone has deliberately cleaned it out. The condiment shelves were still there, the mustard, the soy sauce, the bottle of hot sauce Noah put on everything. But the shelves where Claire kept her meal prep containers, the ones she labeled with days of the week in her neat handwriting, those were bare. Daniel closed the refrigerator slowly. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment, his hand still on the door handle, and then he walked upstairs. He checked Noah's room first. The bed was made, the toys were still there, the Legos on the shelf, the baseball glove hanging from the bedpost, the stack of books on the nightstand. But the dresser was open, half the drawers pulled out, and they were empty. Not ransacked, not thrown open in a hurry, neatly emptied, like someone had taken their time. Daniel walked down the hall to the master bedroom. Claire's closet was open. I didn't want to look. He already knew what he was going to see. But he looked anyway because some part of him, the part that had been lying to itself for years, still needed the confirmation. Half the clothes were gone. Her side of the closet, the right side, the side she had filled over 11 years with the careful, particular way she organized everything, by color, by season, by how often she wore it, that side was half empty. The everyday things were gone, the work clothes, the jeans, the sweaters she wore around the house on weekends. What remained was what she'd left behind deliberately, the formal dresses she never wore anymore, the winter coats that were too heavy to move easily, a few things that maybe she'd decided weren't worth the effort. Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed. He sat there in the dark for a long time. Then he got up, walked to his office at the end of the hall, and opened his laptop. He was looking for something he wasn't sure what. Evidence, maybe. Some explanation that would make all of this make sense. He opened his email, telling himself he was checking work messages when he saw it. The email was from Noah's school, Seattle Academy for Young Scholars, the private school that cost $30,000 a year, and that Daniel had chosen specifically because of its reputation, its testing scores, its network. The subject line read, Student Enrollment Confirmation. Daniel opened it because something about the wording was slightly off. Not re-enrollment, not upcoming year preparation. Enrollment confirmation. Like someone had just enrolled fresh. He read the first line. Then he read it again. The email confirmed the enrollment of Noah Bennett in the 5th grade at Westside Learning Academy. Not Noah Crawford. Noah Bennett. A different school. A different name. Daniel stared at the screen for so long that the laptop went to sleep, and he had to move the mouse to wake it up. He read it again slowly, word by word, like maybe he had misunderstood something, like maybe there was a clerical error, a mix-up, some administrative mistake that would explain why his son's name was wrong. But the email was addressed to Claire Bennett, not Claire Crawford. Claire Bennett. She had gone back to her maiden name, and she had changed Noah's name to match. The legal process required to do that, the paperwork, the court filings, the waiting period, none of that happened in 7 days. None of that happened in a week. That had been set in motion weeks ago, maybe months ago, quietly, carefully, while Daniel was sitting across from Victoria at dinner and thinking about how uncomplicated she made him feel. Claire had been planning this, not leaving in a moment of anger, not packing a bag in a rush after a fight, planning, systematically, legally, with the kind of patience and precision that Daniel had always taken for granted because he'd always thought of her as the quiet one, the soft one, the one who held things together while he went out and built the empire. He had mistaken her silence for submission. He had mistaken her patience for weakness. He had been catastrophically wrong about both. Daniel picked up his phone and called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her voice calm, warm, the voice he had stopped really hearing years ago, said to leave a message. He called again. Voicemail. He called a 3rd time, and this time he left a message, and he kept his voice as controlled as he could because he was Daniel Crawford, and he did not fall apart in front of people, not even voicemails, not even when the floor was dropping out from under him. Claire, it's me. I'm home. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to call me back. Whatever this is, we can talk about it. Just call me back. He hung up. He called Victoria. He didn't know why. She picked up on the 2nd ring, still warm from their goodbye, still in that Miami energy, and he heard bar noise in the background and realized she'd gone back out after dropping him at the airport. He didn't say much. He told her there was a situation at home. She made sympathetic noises. He hung up before she could ask questions, because suddenly Victoria felt very far away, very small, very beside the point. He spent most of that night sitting in his office. By 3 in the morning, he had pulled up every online resource he could find about name changes, about emergency custody orders, about what rights a father had when a mother relocated with a child. He had called his lawyer's emergency line and left a message. He had gone through every email from the past 6 months, looking for something, some warning, some sign, and he had found nothing because he hadn't been paying attention. That was the truth he kept running into, no matter where he looked. He hadn't been paying attention. When the sun came up, Daniel Crawford had not slept. He had changed out of his travel clothes, showered, put on a suit, a good one, the charcoal gray one he wore for important meetings because he thought that if he looked like the version of himself that people respected, he would be able to handle whatever came next. He drove to Noah's old school first, Seattle Academy for Young Scholars. He knew the building, knew the parking lot, had been there exactly twice in 3 years, once for the admissions meeting, and once for a holiday concert that he'd left early because of a call from a client in Tokyo. He walked in through the front entrance, and the receptionist at the front desk looked up and smiled the polite, professionally neutral smile of someone who has been briefed. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "I'm Daniel Crawford. My son Noah is a student here. I need to speak with someone about his enrollment records." The receptionist typed something, looked at the screen, typed again, and then looked back at him with that same carefully neutral expression. "Mr. Crawford, I'm afraid Noah Crawford is no longer enrolled at this school." "I know that," Daniel said, and he kept his voice even. "I'm trying to find out where he's been transferred. I'm his father." I understand, but I'm not able to release information about a student's new enrollment to anyone who is not listed as an authorized contact. I'm listed as an authorized contact. I've been listed since the day we enrolled him. More typing. A pause that lasted slightly too long. Sir, it appears that the authorized contact list was updated approximately 3 weeks ago. I'm not able to discuss the specifics of that update, but I can tell you that your name is no longer on the list for this student. Daniel stared at her. 3 weeks ago, he repeated. Yes, sir. My name was removed from my own son's school records 3 weeks ago. The receptionist held his gaze with practiced calm. She had dealt with this kind of situation before. I can connect you with our administrative director if you'd like to discuss the process for updating contact authorization. I would like, Daniel said very quietly, to speak with the principal. Dr. Eleanor Marsh, the principal of Seattle Academy for Young Scholars, was a woman in her late 50s who had been running that school for 22 years and who had seen approximately everything. She met Daniel in the hallway outside her office with the same composed, measured energy that the receptionist had used, and Daniel understood immediately that this woman had been told to expect him. Mr. Crawford, why don't you come in? He sat across from her desk. It was a good office orderly warm, full of the particular kind of academic dignity that the school charged parents $30,000 a year to be associated with. He had always liked this office on the 2 occasions he'd been in it. Today, it felt like a courtroom. Dr. Marsh, I need to know where my son has been enrolled. I understand your concern, she said, and I want to be straightforward with you. There have been legal proceedings that affect Noah's enrollment and your access to his educational records. Those proceedings are not something our school is party to. We simply complied with the documentation we received. What documentation? I'm not in a position to share that without the appropriate legal authorization. Dr. Marsh, Daniel said, and he leaned forward slightly because he was a man who had built a company on the power of presence, on the ability to fill a room, and he needed that to work right now. I am this child's father. I have been paying for his education at this school for 3 years. I have a right to know. Mr. Crawford. She said it gently, but she said it firmly, and she did not move, did not lean back, did not give him any ground. The documentation we received came through proper legal channels. Your attorney will be able to advise you on next steps. What I can tell you is that our obligation is to the safety and well-being of our students, and we take that obligation very seriously. He drove home. He sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before he went inside. His lawyer called at 9:30. Marcus Webb, who had worked for Daniel for 8 years, who handled his corporate legal matters, who had never in 8 years called him with a tone of voice like the one he was using now, measured careful, choosing each word with precision. Daniel, I got your message. I've had a chance to look into a few things this morning. Tell me what's happening. Claire filed for legal separation approximately 6 weeks ago. The initial filing was handled quietly through a family law firm, not anyone you know. She has been building a case for modified custody for several months. It appears she has documentation of Daniel. I need to ask you something directly. Ask it. The past 18 months, your travel schedule, your availability for Noah's medical appointments, your presence at the household in general. How would you characterize that? Silence. Daniel. I've been working, Daniel said. Yes, and she has records showing that. Detailed records. There are medical appointment logs, texts. You didn't respond to voicemails that were not returned. There are photographs from school events and hospital visits. She has an affidavit from Noah's pediatric pulmonologist. A what? Noah's lung doctor Daniel, the one who treats his asthma. The doctor submitted an affidavit describing the medical history of the child, the frequency and severity of his episodes, and the documented instances of emergency care. The affidavit notes that in 18 months of records, your name appears exactly once as a present guardian. Daniel was standing in his kitchen. He was gripping the edge of the counter. Once, he said. Once, Marcus repeated. She went to a judge with an emergency request 6 days ago while you were in Miami. The judge granted a temporary custody order giving Claire sole decision-making authority pending the full hearing. That order is what allowed the school enrollment change, the medical record update, and the name change filing. She can't change his name without my consent. She has filed the petition. You have the right to contest it at the hearing. But Daniel, I have to be honest with you. The picture being painted here is not favorable. We need to talk about strategy, and we need to start building a response that is grounded in actual evidence of your involvement in this child's life. Can you give me that? Another silence. a longer one. When's the hearing? 31 days. Daniel hung up the phone and stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the house be quiet around him. 31 days. I thought about the last 31 days, the deal he'd been closing in Singapore, the weekend in Vegas with clients from the Houston office, the 2 weeks of text messages from Claire that he had answered in fragments, half his mind always somewhere else. The voicemail she'd left him 3 weeks ago that he had listened to in the back of a car, heading to a dinner, and told himself he'd call back in the morning. He had never called back. He remembered the voicemail now with a clarity that felt almost physical. He could hear her voice, not angry, not accusing, just tired in that deep bone-level way that people get when they have been tired for so long that they've stopped expecting it to change. She had said, "Daniel Noah had a rough night. His breathing was bad. We were at the ER until 4 in the morning. He's okay now, he's sleeping. I would have liked for you to know, in case you want to call him later. He would like to hear your voice." Daniel had listened to that message in the back of a car at 8:15 in the evening on his way to a dinner at a Japanese restaurant that cost more per person than most people made in a week. He had thought, "I'll call in the morning." He had not called in the morning. He had had breakfast with a client, then a meeting, then a flight. The message sat in his voicemail for 11 days before he deleted it to clear space. He had deleted it. He had deleted his son's voice requesting to hear from him, and he had not called, and he had gotten on a plane to Miami with Victoria 4 days later, and laughed at something she said and ordered champagne, and thought about how uncomplicated his life felt when he was away from it. Daniel sat down on the kitchen floor. He sat on the floor of his expensive kitchen in his expensive suit, in the house that he had bought because it had the right address and the right square footage and the right everything to prove to people who didn't matter that he was the man he wanted them to think he was. And he sat there for a very long time. He had told himself for years that he was building something, that the work, the travel, the deals inside the deals, the endless motion, all of it was for his family, for Claire, for Noah. He had told himself that the money he brought home was the proof of his love, that providing was the same as being present, that if he kept the house and the school and the lifestyle funded and running, he had fulfilled his obligation as a husband and a father. He understood now, sitting on that floor, that he had been lying to himself so smoothly and for so long that the lie had felt like truth. You don't build a family by funding it from a distance. You build it by being in it, by showing up, by being the person who answers the phone at 2 in the morning when a child can't breathe, by being the person who sits in the hard plastic chairs of the emergency room and holds someone's hand, by being there physically, bodily present, not as a concept, not as a financial line item, but as a person. Claire had been that person, every time, and Daniel had been somewhere else, every time. He pulled out his phone and tried her number one more time. It went straight to voicemail now, which meant she had seen his calls and silenced them. He listened to her voice again on the outgoing message, calm, warm, familiar, and for the first time in years, he really heard it. Heard how tired it was underneath the warmth, how careful. He didn't leave a message. He put the phone down on the kitchen floor beside him and stared at the ceiling of his expensive house and understood that some things once broken announce themselves with a silence so complete that there's no mistaking it for anything but the truth. Claire had not left him in anger. She had left him in peace. That was the part that was hardest to take. Not the fury, not the confrontation, not the screaming match he could have argued with, could have fought against, could have found some handheld in the rock face to pull himself back up. She had simply carefully, legally, methodically taken herself and their son out of a life that had stopped working for them, and she had done it so quietly that he hadn't even noticed until the door was already closed and locked from the other side. In 31 days, there would be a hearing. In 31 days, a judge would look at the record of his life as a father and ask him questions he didn't have answers to. But tonight in the house that was still full of all his furniture and none of his family, Daniel Crawford sat on the kitchen floor and learned what it felt like to have all the money in the world and nothing to spend it on that mattered. He had thought he was building a future. He had not noticed somewhere along the way that he had let the present burn down to the ground. Marcus Webb called again at noon the next day, and this time his voice had dropped another register, the way lawyers' voices do when the news has gotten worse overnight and they've had time to read everything twice. "Daniel, I need you to come into the office today, not tomorrow, today. Tell me over the phone." "I'd rather not." "Marcus, tell me over the phone." A pause, the sound of papers being moved. Then, she has a private investigator's report, 14 months of documentation, photographs, timestamps, credit card records, hotel receipts. Miami is in there, but Miami is almost the least of it. There are 7 other trips listed. 3 of them overlap directly with documented medical events involving Noah. Daniel didn't say anything. One of them, Marcus continued, and his voice went very flat, overlaps with the night Noah was admitted to Seattle Children's Hospital for a respiratory episode that required overnight observation. Claire called you 11 times that night. The PI has your phone records showing the calls went unanswered. The same records show your phone pinging off a cell tower in Las Vegas. I didn't know it was that serious, Daniel said. She didn't leave a message saying it was that serious. She left 4 messages, Daniel. I've read the transcripts. The silence between them was the kind that fills up with everything that cannot be taken back. Daniel drove to Marcus's office. He sat across from the man who had handled his corporate legal work for 8 years, his contracts, his acquisitions, the careful machinery of his professional life, and he watched Marcus lay out a series of documents on the desk between them, with the practiced, unhurried movement of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. The PI report was 63 pages. Daniel picked it up and put it back down after reading the first page, because the first page had a photograph time-stamped location, tagged of him and Victoria, at a restaurant in Chicago, and the date in the corner was the same date that Noah had been admitted to the hospital. I was smiling in the photograph. He had a glass of wine in his hand. He looked like a man without a care in the world, because that night he had been exactly that. "What does she want?" Daniel asked. "Primary physical custody, sole legal decision-making authority, child support, and she is not asking for alimony, which tells me her attorney advised her that asking for less makes the custody argument stronger. She's not interested in your money, Daniel. She's interested in your son." "He's my son, too." "Then we're going to need to prove that, and right now the evidence is not on your side." Daniel left Marcus's office 2 hours later with a list of things he needed to gather any documentation of his involvement in Noah's life, any school events he'd attended, any medical appointments, any records of time spent. He sat in his car in the parking garage and tried to make the list in his head. He came up with almost nothing. Not because nothing had happened, but because he had been so thoroughly, systematically absent from the documented record of his son's life that there was almost no paper trail connecting them. Claire's name was on everything. The school forms, the doctor's paperwork, the insurance claims, the therapy intake forms. Noah had seen a speech therapist for a year in 2nd grade, and Daniel had not known about it until this moment, reading through the medical summary Marcus had given him. His son had been in speech therapy for a year. He had not known. He drove home. He walked past the console table with the ceramic bowl and the framed photos on the wall, and he stopped and really looked at the photos for the first time in longer than he could remember. There were 12 frames. In 7 of them, Claire was alone with Noah. In 3, it was extended family, Claire's parents, her sister. In 2, Daniel was present. One was the hospital photo from the day Noah was born, Daniel holding the baby with the stiff, slightly terrified posture of a man who has never held something so fragile and is afraid to break it. The other was a Christmas photo from 4 years ago, Daniel standing slightly apart from Claire and Noah, a half smile on his face, his phone visible in his jacket pocket the way it always was. He looked at that photo for a long time. He remembered that Christmas. He had been on a call for most of Christmas Eve. He had promised Noah they would build something together, a model airplane kit the kid had asked for, and then the Tokyo deal had dragged into the evening, and by the time the call ended, Noah was already asleep and the model was still in its box. He remembered thinking, "We'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it after the holidays. We'll find time." They had never found time. The box was probably still somewhere in Noah's room, unopened, still in its plastic wrap because Daniel had never opened it, and Noah had stopped asking. He went to Noah's room and opened the closet. The box was on the top shelf, still wrapped. The price tag was still on it, $32.99. Daniel sat on the edge of Noah's bed and held the box in both hands and tried to remember the last real conversation he'd had with his son. Not a quick call from an airport, not a 5-minute check-in before bed, a real conversation face-to-face where he had been fully present and paying attention and nowhere else in his mind. He couldn't find it. That was the moment it stopped being about strategy, about the hearing, the lawyers, the PI report, the 63 pages of documented failures. For one unguarded moment, sitting on his son's bed, holding a model airplane kit that had never been opened, Daniel Crawford stopped calculating and just felt what was actually there. Grief, plain and uncomplicated. The grief of a man who had been handed something irreplaceable and had not understood what it was until he was sitting in the aftermath of having wasted it. He put the box back on the shelf. He called Claire again. This time, after 4 rings, she picked up. The silence on the line when she answered was different from the voicemail silence. It was inhabited. He could hear her breathing. He could hear faintly in the background the sound of a television, a cartoon, something with bright music, and he knew Noah was in the next room. "Claire," he said. "Daniel." Her voice was completely level. Not cold, not warm, just steady in the way of someone who has done a great deal of preparation for this exact moment. "I need to talk to you. Our attorneys can talk. I'm not calling about the hearing. I'm calling because—" He stopped, started again. "Is Noah okay after the episode last month? Is he okay now?" A pause. Then, "He's fine. His oxygen levels are stable. Dr. Reeves adjusted his medication." "Dr. Reeves," Daniel repeated because he didn't know who Dr. Reeves was, and he needed her to know that needed to say it out loud so the admission could exist between them. Claire heard it. "His new pulmonologist. We switched 8 months ago when the practice moved locations." 8 months. "I didn't know you'd switched. I sent you an email. You didn't respond. I sent a follow-up 2 weeks later. You didn't respond to that either. I mentioned it in a voicemail. Daniel, I stopped expecting you to know things about Noah's medical care a long time ago. I had to. We couldn't wait for you to pay attention." The way she said it, without bitterness, without point scoring, just with the flat, factual weariness of someone describing how they had adapted to a difficult reality, was worse than anything she could have said in anger. Anger he could have deflected. This he could not. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "That's not information I'm going to give you right now." "Claire, I'm not. I just want to know that you're somewhere safe, that Noah is somewhere safe." "We're safe. We've always been safe. That was never the problem." The cartoon in the background got louder for a moment, like Noah had turned up the volume, and Daniel could hear his son laughing at something, that specific, bright, unself-conscious laugh that kids have before they learn to be careful about when they show happiness. He closed his eyes and listened to it for the 2 or 3 seconds it lasted. "Can I talk to him?" Daniel asked. Silence. "Claire, can I just—" "Not tonight," she said. And then quieter. "He doesn't know everything yet. I've kept it simple. I told him you had to go away for a while. I'm not going to put him in the middle of this, Daniel. Don't ask me to. I'm not asking you to put him in the middle. I'm asking to speak to my son. And I'm telling you that tonight is not the right time. When there's a legal framework in place that tells us both what the right time is, we'll follow it." A pause. "Talk to your lawyer." She hung up. Daniel stood in the hallway outside Noah's room with the dead phone in his hand and tried to process the specific quality of powerlessness he was feeling, because it was unlike anything he had encountered in his professional life. In business, there was always a lever somewhere, always a negotiation, a workaround, a way to restructure the situation so that the outcome shifted in your favor. He had built an entire career on finding those levers. He was very good at it. There was no lever here. Claire had not left a gap. She had not made an emotional decision in a heated moment that could be walked back with the right words. She had thought it through with the same careful patience that she applied to everything, to raising Noah, to managing the household, to the 11 years of holding a family together largely on her own. And she had constructed something that had no leverage points because she had anticipated where he would try to push and had made sure there was nothing to push against. He had underestimated her so completely. He sat with that for a long time. 3 days after that phone call, Daniel did something he had not done in years. He asked his assistant to clear his calendar. Not for a trip, not for a deal, not for a meeting. He cleared it because he needed to sit still and think about his life without the constant forward motion of work to prevent him from feeling what was underneath it. He started reading. Not industry reports, not market analyses, the documents Marcus had given him. All 63 pages of the PI report. He read every page, every timestamp, every notation. He read Claire's documented attempts to reach him during each of the listed incidents. He read the notes from Noah's medical appointments, the dates and diagnoses, the follow-up care instructions that Claire had filed and managed and arranged entirely alone. He read the entry for a Tuesday afternoon in October 14 months ago, when Noah had an asthma attack at school, and Claire had called Daniel 6 times in 40 minutes while driving to the school and then to the urgent care clinic. Daniel's phone had been off for a film screening, a private event for a real estate client who wanted to show investors a promotional documentary about a development project. The film was 90 minutes long. Daniel had silenced his phone before it started, which was the professional thing to do, and had not checked it until after the networking drinks that followed. By the time he saw the missed calls, Noah was home medicated asleep, and Claire had been awake for 19 consecutive hours. He read his own text response quoted in the report. "Just saw your calls. Everything okay. In meetings all day. Call me when you can." He had sent that text at 9:47 in the evening. Claire had not responded. He read through the October entry 3 times. Then he set the documents down on the desk and pressed both hands flat against the surface and breathed slowly the way he'd learned in a mindfulness retreat he'd attended 4 years ago in Sedona because a business coach had told him it would improve his productivity. I thought about what it felt like to be Claire. Not as an intellectual exercise, not as legal strategy, actually tried to occupy the experience of being the person on the other side of those 6 unanswered calls. Driving to your child's school. Your son is struggling to breathe. Your phone rings and rings and rings, and the person who is supposed to be your partner, the person who is supposed to answer, does not pick up because he is watching a documentary about real estate. Daniel had never really tried to feel what Claire felt. He had assumed he understood her because he knew the broad outlines. She was a good mother. She ran the household well. She had given up her career for their family, and he had been grateful in the abstract way of someone who benefits greatly from a sacrifice without ever fully reckoning with what it cost. He had thought, she loves this. This is her calling. She is good at it, and she finds meaning in it. He had never once asked her if that was true. He had never asked because he was afraid of what she might say. And some part of him buried well below the level of conscious thought had known that asking would require him to change something, and changing something would be harder than not asking. 2 weeks into his legal preparation, Daniel's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He answered. "Is this Daniel Crawford? Who's calling?" "My name is Patricia. I'm a nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital. I'm calling because Noah Crawford is listed in our records as your dependent, and there's a situation I need to make you aware of." Daniel was on his feet before she finished the sentence. "What happened? Is he?" "Mr. Crawford Noah is currently being treated for an acute asthma exacerbation. He was brought in approximately 40 minutes ago. He is stable, his oxygen is improving, but I need to ask, are you able to come to the hospital?" Daniel was already reaching for his keys. "I'm on my way." "I should let you know," the nurse said carefully, "that Noah's mother is already here, and there is a temporary custody order on file that designates her as the sole medical decision-maker. You will be able to see Noah, but any medical decisions will be—" "I understand," Daniel said. "I'm coming." He drove to Seattle Children's Hospital in 22 minutes, which was faster than was legal, and also faster than he had ever driven to that hospital before, which was not something he let himself think about. He found the pediatric respiratory unit and gave his name at the desk, and the nurse there, not Patricia, a different one, checked something on her computer and made a small involuntary expression that people make when they have to deliver complicated news, and then carefully neutralized it before looking up. "Mr. Crawford, I'll let Ms. Bennett know you're here." He waited in the hallway. He was not told to wait in the waiting room. He was not shown to Noah's room. He waited in the hallway standing because there was something about sitting down that felt like an acceptance of a status he was not ready to accept. Claire came out of the room 4 minutes later. She pulled the door closed behind her. She looked at him for a long moment without speaking. She looked tired, the deep kind, the chronic kind, but she also looked steady in a way that he recognized from years ago, from before everything, from the version of her that he had somehow stopped seeing somewhere along the way. "How is he?" Daniel asked. "Better. His peak flow is coming up. Dr. Reeves thinks he can go home tonight if he stays stable for another couple of hours." "Good. That's good." Silence. She folded her arms across her chest, not defensively, just like someone who has been cold for a long time and is holding their own warmth close. "Why is he having more episodes?" Daniel asked. "Is it getting worse?" It's stress reactive, Claire said, and something crossed her face. His respiratory system responds to stress. Dr. Reeves explained it a long time ago. When things are unsettled at home, when his environment is unpredictable, his body reacts. She paused. He's been asking questions about why things are different, about where you are. Kids his age know when something is wrong. He knows something is wrong. Daniel felt that in his chest like something physical. "Can I see him?" he asked. Claire looked at the closed door, then back at Daniel. Something moved across her face that he couldn't fully read, not softness exactly, but not hardness either. Something more complicated than either. "For a few minutes," she said. "He doesn't need to be upset right now. I'm not going to upset him." "Daniel." She said his name the way she used to say it a long time ago, when they were still in the habit of being honest with each other. "You've been upsetting him for a year and a half without knowing you were doing it. That's the whole problem. It was never intentional. It was never malicious. It was just absence. And absence has weight. He felt it even when he didn't have words for it." Daniel didn't answer because there was nothing to answer with. She pushed the door open. Noah was propped up against the pillows with a breathing mask around his neck, pushed down so his face was clear, and he was wearing the hospital gown that was slightly too big for him, and looking at the ceiling the way kids do when they are tired and wired and uncertain all at once. When the door opened, he looked over, and when he saw Daniel, something moved across his face. Surprise, a complex flickering thing that was not quite joy and not quite fear, but contained elements of both. "Dad," Noah said. The word landed in Daniel's chest like a stone dropped into still water. "Hey, buddy." He walked to the chair beside the bed and sat down, and he looked at his son, really looked the way he had not looked in too long. Noah was 10, but he looked younger against the hospital pillow, smaller the way kids do when they are sick. He had Claire's eyes and Daniel's jaw and a scattering of freckles across his nose that had appeared in the last year or maybe longer, and Daniel hadn't noticed. "Does it hurt?" Daniel asked. "My chest is sore from coughing." Noah looked at him for a moment. "Mom said you'd been busy." "I have been busy," Daniel said, "but I'm here now." Noah nodded the slow, serious nod of a 10-year-old who is processing something too large for his vocabulary. "Are you going to stay?" Daniel looked at his son's face. The honest, direct, uncomplicated question of a child who does not yet know how to dress up what he really means, who has not learned yet to ask for things sideways. "Yeah," Daniel said. "I'm staying." He did not mean the hospital. And Noah, who was 10 and perceptive and had been living inside this story longer than either of his parents fully realized, seemed to understand that. He reached out and put his small hand on Daniel's arm, not clutching, not demanding, just resting there, like a reminder, like a question, like something that had been waiting a long time to find out if it was going to be answered. Daniel put his hand over his son's hand and held it there. Claire stood just inside the doorway. She did not come closer, and she did not leave. She watched the two of them, the man she had married and was now leaving, and the child she had raised largely alone, and whatever she was feeling, she kept it private because that was what she did. That was what she had always done. She kept it together in the room where it needed to be kept together, and she handled what needed to be handled, and she did not fall apart in front of anyone, least of all the people who needed her to be solid. Daniel stayed for an hour. He and Noah talked not about anything important, not about the things that were actually happening, just about baseball, and a video game Noah had been playing, and a book his teacher had read to the class that he thought was pretty good. Small talk, easy things, the kinds of things Daniel had not sat still long enough to hear in longer than he could say. When the hour was up and the nurse came to check Noah's oxygen levels, Daniel stood and squeezed his son's hand once gently. "Get some rest," he said. "Will you come see me?" Noah asked. "Like at the new place Mom said we have a new place." Daniel looked at Claire, who was watching him with that steady, unreadable expression. "Yeah," he said. "We'll figure it out." He walked out of the room. Claire followed him into the hallway and pulled the door closed behind her. They stood facing each other in the corridor. Daniel said, "I'm sorry." The words came out before he had consciously decided to say them, and they came out without the lawyerly, careful framing he had been practicing for the hearing, without the qualifications, and the strategic vulnerability that Marcus had suggested might help his case. They came out plain, because they were plain. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Her expression did not soften exactly, but something in it shifted like a door that doesn't open, but stops being locked. "I know you are," she said. I believe that's true. But, Daniel said, but sorry doesn't rewrite what happened. Sorry doesn't put you in that waiting room for the 3 times before tonight. Sorry doesn't give Noah back the 1.5 years where he needed his father, and his father was... She stopped, started again. You know where his father was. I know. I'm not doing this to punish you, Claire said, and she looked him directly in the eye the way she always had, the unflinching directness that he had once found intimidating and then had simply stopped noticing. I need you to understand that. This is not revenge. This is not about Victoria, although a muscle in her jaw moved. That's its own thing. This is about Noah, about building a life where he can count on what's real. He needs consistency. He needs to know that the person who says they'll be there actually shows up. Right now, I'm the only person who has proven that. The documents prove that. The court will see that. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you know that's true. Daniel did not argue with her. He did not deploy any of the strategies Marcus had suggested. He just stood there in the hospital corridor and let what she'd said exist without deflecting it. He asked me if I was going to stay, Daniel said. I heard. I meant it. Claire looked at him. Meaning it is where you start, she said. It's not where you finish. She pulled her cardigan tighter across her chest. Go home, Daniel. Let Noah rest. Talk to your lawyer. Do what you have to do. But if you actually mean what you said, if this is something real, and not just the panic of someone who just realized what he's losing, then show up. Not to the hearing, not on paper. Show up for the actual days, the regular days, the boring days, the days where nothing dramatic is happening, and you could be somewhere more interesting, and you choose to be there anyway. She paused. That's what Noah needs. That's what he's always needed. She went back into the room. Daniel walked down the hospital corridor alone past the nurse's station and the family waiting area where a woman was sitting with her head in her hands and a man was pacing with his phone pressed to his ear, past the elevator that took him to the parking garage, out into the night air that hit him cold and immediate. He sat in his car without starting it. He thought about what Claire had said, not about her point strategically, not about how to use it or counter it. He thought about the words themselves, the boring days, the days where nothing dramatic is happening. He had spent his entire adult life running toward the dramatic, the deal, the close, the win, the moment of triumph that proved he was what he told himself he was. He had been addicted to the feeling of forward motion, to the next thing, to the version of his life that existed in the future he was always building toward. He had not understood that his son was not in the future. His son was in the now. His son had always been in the now, in the present, in the actual days, the Tuesday afternoons and the Wednesday evenings and the Saturday mornings that Daniel had spent somewhere else doing something that felt more urgent, more significant, more deserving of his attention. He started the car. He drove home. He walked into the house and past the console table and the framed photos and up the stairs to Noah's room, and he sat on the edge of the bed and he reached up and took the model airplane kit down from the shelf. He opened the plastic wrap. He sat there with the pieces in his hands until 2 a.m, not building it. He would not build it without Noah, but reading the instructions, learning the parts, figuring out how it went together so that when he sat down with his son, he would be ready. So that for once, he would not be the person who arrived unprepared. The model airplane kit sat on Daniel's kitchen table for 4 days before he touched it again. He had meant what he said in the hospital. He had meant every word of it. But meaning something at 2 a.m. in a hospital parking garage and then waking up the next day inside the actual machinery of your consequences, those are 2 different experiences, and the distance between them is where most people's good intentions go to die. Marcus called on a Thursday morning 9 days before the hearing. "We have a problem," Marcus said, and he did not say good morning first, which told Daniel everything he needed to know about the size of the problem before Marcus said another word. "Tell me." Claire's attorney filed a supplemental declaration yesterday. It's Daniel, it's detailed. Beyond the PI report, she has text message chains going back 3 years, screenshots. She has emails you sent to your assistant coordinating travel that overlapped with Noah's scheduled medical appointments. She has a declaration from Claire's sister Jennifer, describing specific incidents in detail, conversations she had with Claire, things she witnessed. And she has something else. Marcus paused. She has a declaration from Victoria Lane. The name hit Daniel like cold water. "Victoria," he repeated. She provided a voluntary declaration to Claire's attorney. It details the nature and timeline of your relationship, including dates, locations. And Daniel, she described a conversation you apparently had with her in which you stated that your home life was, and I'm quoting here, basically over on paper, just not official yet. Daniel sat down. She also stated, Marcus continued, that you told her you were planning to file for divorce yourself after a deal closed in the second quarter. She has text messages supporting that. The silence between them stretched. I never said that, Daniel said. Not like that. Not I was venting. It was talk. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what she said and what the texts show. And what they show is a man who had privately decided his marriage was over and was operating accordingly, while his wife had no idea, while his wife was managing a sick child alone and believing, or at least hoping, that the marriage was something that could still be repaired. Marcus's voice was careful, professional. But underneath it, Daniel could hear something that was not quite judgment, but was its close neighbor. This is going to come up at the hearing. We need to prepare for it. Daniel hung up the phone and sat at his kitchen table and did not move for a very long time. Victoria had given a declaration. He turned this fact over in his mind, looking at it from different angles, trying to find the version of it that made sense. He and Victoria had ended things the morning after he came home to the empty house, not dramatically, not with a real conversation, just a mutual retreat, the way two people back away from a fire that has suddenly gotten too large. He had not been angry at her. He had not thought much about her at all in the weeks since, which probably said something true about what the relationship had actually been. But she had gone to Claire's attorney, voluntarily. He tried to imagine what would make a woman do that, and he could only come up with one answer she had felt used. She had believed because he had let her believe that what they had was heading somewhere. That she was not the other woman, but the next woman. That the marriage ending was a formality, a matter of timing, not a moral catastrophe. And then the floor had dropped out, and she had found herself on the wrong side of a story she hadn't fully understood she was in, and this was her way of making sense of it. Or maybe she was simply telling the truth. Maybe the conversation had happened the way she described it, and Daniel had said those words, and he had meant them in the moment, and he had not understood what it meant that he was saying them. He pressed his palms flat on the table. He thought about Claire reading that declaration. Claire sitting across from her attorney reading a document in which another woman described in detail conversations that her husband had been having while she was sitting in emergency rooms and managing medications and telling their son that Daddy was just very busy with work. He thought about what that felt like. He had been trying hard not to think about what things felt like from Claire's side. Not because he didn't care, but because every time he went there, the weight of it was so enormous that it became hard to breathe, and he had a hearing in 9 days, and he needed to be functional. But sitting at that table on that Thursday morning, he let himself go there. He let himself feel it. And it was worse than he had expected. He picked up his phone. He did not call Marcus. He did not call his assistant. He called Claire's number, and this time she picked up on the second ring, and he realized she had been expecting him to call because she already knew about the declaration, had known about it before he did, had probably been waiting to see how long it took him to find out. I know you read it, she said before he could speak. Yeah, I didn't go looking for her, Claire said. She called my attorney's office. She reached out. I know. A pause. Does it change anything for you, knowing that she... It doesn't change anything that matters, Daniel said. It doesn't change what I did. It doesn't change what you went through. Another pause, longer this time. No, Claire said quietly. It doesn't. I need to ask you something, Daniel said, and I need you to answer honestly, not for the hearing, not for the record, just honestly, between us. Ask it. When did you stop believing I was going to change? The silence on the line was different this time. Not the silence of someone choosing not to answer. The silence of someone going back, traveling through time, looking for the exact moment. February, she said finally. 2 years ago. Noah had bronchitis, not a bad episode, just regular sick, but he had a fever for 5 days and he kept asking for you. Every morning he'd wake up and ask if you were coming home that night. And every morning I had to tell him you were busy. On the 4th day I called you and I said, Daniel, he's asking for you, please come home early tonight, and you said you'd try. She stopped. You didn't come home until after he was asleep. And when I told you the next morning that he'd asked for you, you said, and I remember this exactly, kids are resilient, he'll be fine. Daniel closed his eyes. "And I looked at you," Claire said, "and I realized that you actually believed that. You weren't being callous on purpose. You genuinely believed it. You had convinced yourself so thoroughly that what you were doing was acceptable that you couldn't even see what you were doing. And I thought, this is not a man who is going to change. This is a man who has decided somewhere deep down that this version of our life is fine. And it is not fine. It has never been fine. But I am the only one who knows that, because I am the only one who is actually living in it." The words came down on him with the unhurried weight of things that have been true for a long time. "February," he said. "February," she confirmed. "I spent the next 8 months trying to talk myself out of it, trying to find a reason to believe I was wrong about you, trying to keep the door open." Her voice stayed level. "You never walked through it." He didn't have an answer for that. There was no answer, only the fact of it, which was enough. 6 days before the hearing, Daniel did something that Marcus had not advised and could not have predicted. He called Claire's attorney, not to negotiate, not to threaten. He called Rebecca Torres, who had been Claire's family law attorney for the past 7 months, and who had built the case against him with the methodical precision of someone who has done this many times and has stopped finding it surprising when men are shocked by the evidence of their own behavior. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "you should know that anything you say to me without your attorney present—" "I know, I'm not calling about the case." He stopped. "I want to request something, through you, for Claire. I want to ask her if she'd be willing to meet with me, before the hearing. No attorneys, no strategy, just a conversation. In a public place if she wants. I have things I want to say to her that aren't legal arguments." Silence on the line. "I'll pass that along," Rebecca said carefully. "Thank you." He hung up and called Marcus immediately because Marcus needed to know, and Marcus's response was a 4-second pause, followed by a careful, measured, "Daniel, I want to make sure you understand that any conversation with Claire outside of the legal process—" "I'm not trying to influence the hearing," Daniel said. "I know I can't do that. I'm not trying to change her mind about custody. I know what the right outcome is for Noah. I need her to hear something from me that she deserves to hear, directly, not through lawyers." Another 4-second pause. "All right," Marcus said, "but I'm asking you not to discuss the case." "I won't." Claire agreed to meet. She chose a coffee shop in her neighborhood neutral ground public 15 minutes from the house she was renting, and she arrived 4 minutes after Daniel did, which was intentional. He understood because she was not going to be there first, was not going to be in the position of waiting for him in a way that even slightly echoed the 11 years she'd spent doing exactly that. She sat down across from him. She ordered coffee. She did not make small talk. She looked at him and waited. "I'm not going to try to change the outcome of the hearing," Daniel said. She nodded once. "I wanted to say something to you, and I want to say it without any of the framework around it. No lawyers, no strategy, just the true thing." He looked at his hands on the table, then back at her. "I failed you. I failed Noah. Not because I stopped loving you. I don't think I ever stopped, although I understand if you don't believe that, because I didn't behave like a man who loved his family. I behaved like a man who had convinced himself that love was a thing you could outsource, that if I funded the life would run, that if the structure was there, the people inside it would be fine." He stopped. "I was wrong about that. I was wrong in a way that cost you years that you cannot get back. And I'm sorry, not as a legal strategy, not because I want something from you, just I'm sorry." Claire looked at him for a long moment. She did not cry. He had expected her to cry or to be angry or to say something that would make this easier for him in some way, and she did neither of those things. She looked at him with those clear, steady eyes that had always seen him more accurately than he saw himself. "I know you are," she said. "I think you mean that." "I do. But I need to say something to you too," she said. "And I need you to hear it without turning it into an argument or a legal point or anything other than what it is, which is just the truth." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I spent 11 years loving you, real love, the kind that stays up at 3 in the morning with a sick child and still has enough left over to keep the household running and keep the marriage alive and keep trying, always trying, because I believed in you. I believed in the man I married, even when the man I was living with stopped resembling him very much." Her voice stayed steady. "I gave everything I had to making our life work, and I did it alone. Not because I wanted to be alone, because you left me alone every day in 100 small ways, and then a few very large ones." She paused. "I want you to know that I don't hate you. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because I have one life, Daniel. I have one life, and Noah has one childhood, and I am not going to spend either of them waiting for you to remember that we exist." He absorbed that. "I know," he said. "I need you to be his father," Claire said, and her voice shifted something harder and more urgent underneath it now. "Not because the court orders it, because you choose it every day, even the boring days, even the days when there's something else you could be doing. I need you to show up for him because he matters more than the deal, more than the trip, more than—" She stopped, and for the first time something moved across her face that was not steadiness, not calm, but something raw and briefly visible. "More than whatever she offered you." The coffee shop noise moved around them Cup's conversation, the low ambient hum of other people's ordinary days. "He does," Daniel said. "He matters more than all of it. I know that now." "You knew it before," Claire said quietly. "You just chose not to act like it." That was the truest thing anyone had said to him in years. He drove home from that coffee shop, and he sat in his car in the driveway, and he thought about the 11 years. Not the highlights, not the wedding, not the day Noah was born, not the good vacations and the good dinners, and the moments he'd been present for and enjoyed, and then moved away from without understanding their weight. He thought about the ordinary days, the Tuesday evenings, the Saturday mornings, the unremarkable stretches of time that constituted the actual texture of a life, the material out of which a family was either built or not built. He had treated those days as filler, as the space between the things that mattered. He had gotten it exactly backward. The hearing was in 2 days when Daniel received a phone call from a number he recognized immediately: Noah's school. Not the old school, the new one, Westside Learning Academy, the one whose name he had first seen on a late-night email, and that had confirmed for him in a single subject line how completely the ground had shifted. He picked up. "Mr. Crawford, this is Amy Delgado, school counselor at Westside Learning Academy. I'm calling because, and I want to be transparent, that I've confirmed with Ms. Bennett that it's appropriate to contact you. Noah has been having a difficult week. He's been withdrawn in class. He had a mild anxiety episode yesterday during lunch. He's not in any danger, but I wanted both parents to be aware." "What kind of anxiety episode?" "He became overwhelmed and asked to go to the counselor's office. He was very upset, crying, said he was scared." She paused. "He said he was scared that his family was broken." Daniel put his hand over his eyes. "He's 10, he said, and his voice came out rough. "Yes, it's a very common response in children experiencing family transitions. What's less common is how clearly he was able to articulate his fear. He said, and I'm sharing this because I think it's important for both parents to hear, he said, I don't want my dad to go away forever. I just want things to stop being scary." Daniel sat with those words. "I just want things to stop being scary." "What can I do?" Daniel asked. "Right now, today, what can I do for him?" Amy Delgado was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that no lawyer or strategist or business advisor had said to him in the months since the empty house and the dark kitchen and the terrifying email. "Call him," she said. "Just call him. Let him hear your voice. Let him know you're not going away. Children that age don't need perfect parents. They need present ones." He called Claire immediately after he hung up. She answered on the first ring, which told him she had been expecting this call, which meant Amy Delgado had called her first, which meant Claire had given permission for this conversation before it happened. She was still protecting Noah even in this, even from the periphery of a phone call. "I heard," Daniel said. "I know," Claire said. "Can I call him tonight just to talk? I won't say anything about any of this. I just want him to hear my voice." A pause that lasted long enough for him to hold his breath. "Yes," Claire said. "Call at 7. He'll be done with dinner." He called at 7. Noah picked up. Claire must have handed him the phone and said, "Dad," with a combination of relief and uncertainty that cracked something open in Daniel's chest. "Hey, buddy, just calling to check in. How are you doing?" A pause. "Okay, I guess." "Yeah, how was school?" "It was fine." Another pause. "Dad." "Yeah." "Are you going to come see me soon?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "Really soon, I promise." Like for real promise, not just saying it. Daniel closed his eyes. For real promise. He heard Noah exhale a small, private 10-year-old sound of relief, and then they talked for 23 minutes about baseball and the model airplane kit and a book Noah was reading and a kid at school who was funny. They talked about nothing. They talked about everything. They talked the way fathers and sons are supposed to talk, in the easy, unhurried way of people who are not running out of time. When Noah said he was tired and needed to go to sleep, he said, "Good night, Dad. Thanks for calling. Thanks for calling." 3 words. A 10-year-old's simple, transparent gratitude for the bare minimum, for a phone call, for a father who showed up in even the smallest possible way, a voice through a phone at 7 in the evening, and did not disappear. Daniel said good night. He hung up. He sat in the silence of his house for a long time. The hearing was the next morning. He arrived early in the navy suit that Marcus had suggested, not the charcoal gray power suit he'd reached for first. He arrived early and sat in the hallway outside the courtroom and did not look at his phone. He looked at the floor. He thought about Noah. He thought about February 2 years ago, and a fever that lasted 5 days, and a child who asked every morning if his father was coming home. Marcus arrived at 8:40 with a leather briefcase and a careful expression. He sat beside Daniel in the hallway and said, "How are you?" "Ready," Daniel said. "I want to remind you that the goal today is—" "I know the goal," Daniel said. "But I need to tell you something first." He looked at Marcus. "I'm not going to fight for primary custody." Marcus went very still. "Daniel, I'm not going to fight for it. Not because I don't want to be in his life. I do more than I can explain. But because the right outcome for Noah is what Claire has built for him. The consistency, the stability. She has earned that. She has documented that. She has lived that for a decade." He looked at his hands. "I want visitation. I want real, structured, regular visitation, and I want to earn more of it over time by actually showing up. But I am not going to walk in there and fight a custody battle that is not in my son's best interest, because it happens to be in my pride's best interest." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "That's," he said carefully, "a significant shift." "I know." "It's also," Marcus said, and something in his voice changed, became quieter, "the right call." The courtroom was smaller than Daniel had expected. He had imagined something vast and formal, commensurate with the size of what was being decided. It was an ordinary room with ordinary chairs and an ordinary judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Okafor, who had been doing family law for 25 years, and who looked at Daniel with the particular gaze of someone who has heard every version of every story and learned to wait for the true thing underneath. Claire sat across the aisle with Rebecca Torres. She was wearing a blue cardigan, and she had her hair up, and she looked, Daniel thought, like herself. Not like a woman dressed for a performance, like herself. The proceedings began. Rebecca Torres presented Claire's case with economy and precision. She did not dramatize. She did not editorialize. She laid out the documented record, the medical history, the appointment logs, the school records, the response times, the presence and absence, the years of one parent holding the whole thing up while the other one was somewhere else, and she let the facts make the argument for her. The facts were sufficient. When it was Marcus's turn, he presented Daniel's position, not a fight, but a request. Regular visitation, a structured pathway to increased involvement, a formal commitment to co-parenting in good faith. He noted that his client was not contesting primary custody. The courtroom went quiet in a particular way when Marcus said that. Judge Okafor looked at Daniel over the top of her reading glasses. It was a long look, the kind of look that takes in more than it seems to. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "you understand that by not contesting primary custody, you are acknowledging that the current arrangement, Ms. Bennett as primary residential parent, is in the best interest of your child." "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said. "And you are prepared to abide by a structured visitation schedule and to demonstrate over time the kind of consistent involvement that would support any future modification." "Yes." She held his gaze for another moment. Then she looked down at the documents in front of her and began to write. The order took 45 minutes to finalize. Claire was granted primary physical and legal custody. Daniel was granted visitation on alternating weekends and 1 evening per week with a review clause at 12 months that would allow for modification based on demonstrated involvement. It was less than he had wanted. It was exactly what he deserved. He stood in the hallway after the hearing, the paperwork in his hands, and Claire walked past him with Rebecca Torres, and she stopped. "Daniel," she said. He looked at her. "What you did in there," she said quietly. "That was—" She stopped. Started again. "Noah will know eventually that you did that. I'll make sure he knows." He nodded. She started to walk away. Then she turned back. "He really wants to build that airplane," she said. And for a fraction of a second, less than a second, a sliver of a moment, something in her face moved. Not softness, not forgiveness. Something older and more complicated than either of those things. A flicker of the woman who had loved him once, looking at the man who had finally, too late and not too late, understood what that meant. Then she was gone. Daniel stood in the courthouse hallway with his visitation paperwork and his Navy suit and the 11 years of everything he had gotten wrong, and he understood that this was not an ending. It was a beginning of a much harder, much more honest thing. He took out his phone. He opened his calendar, the thing that had governed his life for years, the instrument of his perpetual motion and his perpetual absence, and he put in the first visitation date. Saturday, 9 in the morning. He stared at it on the screen. Then he sent Noah a text. Simple, direct, the way a 10-year-old needs things to be. "Hey, buddy, I'll see you Saturday. We're going to build that airplane." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Okay, Dad, can we have pancakes first?" Daniel Crawford stood in a courthouse hallway and read those 7 words and laughed, actually laughed the real kind, not the performed kind, for the first time in longer than he could measure. "Yeah," he typed back, "pancakes first." He put the phone in his pocket. He walked out of the courthouse into the cold Seattle air and stood still for a moment, which was something he had not done in years. Just stood still, not going anywhere, not building anything, not running toward the next thing, just standing in the present tense, which was, it turned out, exactly where everything that mattered had been waiting for him all along. The pancakes were Noah's idea, but Daniel was the one who burned the first batch. It was 7:53 on a Saturday morning, 6 days after the hearing, and Daniel was standing in his kitchen, trying to remember the last time he had cooked anything that was not reheated takeout. He had bought the ingredients the night before, real maple syrup blueberries, the specific brand of pancake mix that Noah had liked since he was 6, which Daniel had looked up by scrolling back through 3 years of grocery delivery confirmations until he found a receipt from a Saturday morning when Claire had been sick, and he had, in one of his rare moments of actual domestic presence, made breakfast for his son. He had found the receipt, he had bought the mix, he had burned the first batch because he had the heat too high, which was exactly the kind of thing a man learns only by doing it wrong first. He scraped the pan, turned the heat down, and started again. Noah arrived at 9 with a backpack over one shoulder and the particular energy of a child who is trying to be casual about something he is not casual about at all. Claire dropped him at the curb. She did not come to the door. That was the agreement exchanges at the curb communication through the co-parenting app that Rebecca Torres had recommended, a clean boundary that protected everyone, including Noah, from having to witness his parents navigate each other in real time. Daniel opened the door before Noah could knock. Noah looked up at him. 10 years old, backpack on one shoulder, his mother's eyes and a cautious, searching expression that children get when they are measuring the temperature of a room before they walk into it. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, buddy, come in. I burned the first batch, just so you know." Noah's face shifted, the caution giving way to something warmer, something that was almost a smile. "How bad?" "Pretty bad. The smoke alarm got involved." Noah laughed, the real laugh, the bright, unself-conscious one, and Daniel felt it the same way he had felt it through the phone at the hospital, like something essential being restored. They made pancakes. Daniel let Noah pour the batter, which Noah did with the solemn concentration of a child who takes small responsibilities seriously, his tongue pressing slightly against his lower lip. They ate at the kitchen table with the maple syrup and the blueberries and a glass of orange juice each, and they talked about baseball, specifically about the Mariners, about a game Noah had watched with Claire the previous weekend, about a player Noah admired, and whose statistics he had memorized, with the comprehensive devotion that 10-year-old boys bring to things they love. Daniel listened. He did not look at his phone. He did not think about his inbox. He listened to his son talk about baseball with the full, undivided attention that he had been rationing out to the wrong people for years, and Noah felt it. Children always feel it when an adult is actually paying attention, and he talked more. He talked the way kids do when they've been given space, freely, recursively, circling back to details he'd forgotten to include, adding commentary, asking questions. After breakfast, they opened the model airplane kit. It took most of the morning. The pieces were small, and there were 47 of them, and the instructions were written in the particular impenetrable language of assembly guides, and they got 3 steps wrong and had to take pieces apart and start again, and Noah got frustrated once, and Daniel got frustrated once, and they laughed at each other for being frustrated, and by noon, the airplane was something recognizable, not finished, but clearly becoming itself. Noah held it up and turned it in his hands. "It's good," he said with the critical approval of someone who has high standards. "We can finish it next time." Next time. 2 words. An assumption of continuity. A child trusting with the brave, renewable trust of someone who has been disappointed before and has decided to try again anyway. "Next time," Daniel said. He meant it in a way he had never meant anything more. That Saturday established something, not a transformation. Daniel was under no illusions about the complexity of what was being rebuilt, or the time it would take, or the number of times he would have to prove himself before the proof became evident to everyone who needed to see it. But it established a rhythm, a first note of something that could, with patience and consistency, become a song. The next 3 months were the hardest months of Daniel's professional life and the most important months of his personal one. Because while he was learning how to be present for Noah, the rest of his world was quietly, systematically falling apart. It started with the call from Richard Hale, the chairman of Crawford Ventures' board of directors, on a Tuesday morning in the 4th week after the hearing. Richard was 71 years old, had been in finance for 40 years, and communicated exclusively in the careful, hedged language of men who have learned that directness costs more than circumspection. When Richard called instead of emailing it, meant the conversation was one he did not want documented. "Daniel, good to hear your voice. How are you holding up?" "I'm doing all right, Richard." "Good, good." A pause. "I want to talk to you about the Meridian deal. The investors are getting, I want to say, cautious, but that might be charitable. They're worried about distraction, about leadership focus. You understand." "Tell me what they're saying." "They're saying that the last quarter's performance numbers combined with the personal situation with the press that's come out." "What press?" Daniel said, and his voice went very still. A pause. "You haven't seen it." "Richard, what press?" The article had run 3 days earlier in a Seattle business publication that covered the local tech and finance scene. It was not a major outlet. It was the kind of publication that serious executives monitored precisely because it moved quickly, and its stories were picked up by larger outlets before the subjects had time to respond. The headline was, "Careful, Careful," in the lawyerly way of headlines that want to imply more than they can legally state. And the story beneath it was a business story on the surface about performance metrics and board dynamics at Crawford Ventures that contained enough personal detail to make clear it was something else. Someone had talked. Someone with knowledge of the custody proceedings, of the PI report of the Miami trip, and the overlap with Noah's hospital admission. The article didn't name Victoria. It didn't need to. It painted a picture in the wide, suggestive strokes of a story that wanted its readers to connect the dots, and its readers had connected them immediately. The comment section, which Daniel made the mistake of reading, was brutal. By the time he got off the phone with Richard Hale, 3 other board members had emailed. 2 investors had called his assistant. His assistant had a list of press inquiries on her desk that she summarized for him in a voice carefully devoid of editorial inflection, because she was professional and loyal, and she was not going to tell him what she actually thought, which he suspected was considerable. "How many inquiries?" Daniel asked. 14, she said, "since yesterday." He told her to hold all of them. He called Marcus. "I've seen it," Marcus said before Daniel could speak. "I've been expecting your call." "Who talked?" "I don't know. It could be any number of people. The custody filing is a matter of record. The details can be accessed. Someone who wanted to do damage put the pieces together and handed them to a reporter." Marcus paused. "Daniel, the more pressing issue right now is the board. What did Richard Hale say?" "He said the investors are worried about leadership focus. That's board speak for we're discussing your role." Daniel sat with that for a moment. "They can't remove me. I have a controlling stake. They can make it very uncomfortable to stay. and they can make the quarterly reporting process a referendum on your judgment, which combined with last quarter's numbers, which were not strong, independent of any of this could create enough pressure that the company's valuation starts to move. Marcus paused again. I want to be honest with you. This is manageable, but it requires your full attention, and your full attention has been understandably appropriately elsewhere. He held a board meeting the following Thursday. He drove to the Crawford Ventures offices, which occupied the 14th and 15th floors of a building in downtown Seattle that he had chosen specifically for its view, its address, its statement. He had built this company from a seed investment and 12 years of relentless work, and he had loved it, genuinely, loved it, the way he had perhaps not loved enough of the other things in his life. And walking into it now, knowing that the men sitting around the conference table were measuring the distance between the company they believed in and the man they were no longer sure about, felt like a particular kind of loss he had not prepared for. There were 6 board members, Richard Hale at the head of the table, 4 investors, and 1 independent director, a woman named Sandra Kim, who had joined the board 18 months ago and who said very little in meetings, and whose silence Daniel had always found more disconcerting than anyone else's words. He sat at his end of the table, and he looked at each of them in turn, and he made a decision in that moment, the same kind of decision he had made in the courthouse hallway, the same instinct toward directness that had surprised him when it surfaced, that felt less like strategy and more like what happened when a man stopped calculating. I know why we're here, he said, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The last several months have been, I've made decisions in my personal life that have affected my focus and my judgment. The quarterly numbers reflect that, and I own it. He looked around the table. I also want to be direct with you about where I am now. The personal situation is resolved legally and to the extent possible emotionally. I have a structure in place. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't ongoing. I have a son and a co-parenting arrangement, and those are permanent features of my life that will require regular time and attention. But I want to be equally clear that I have been building this company for 12 years, and I am not prepared to watch it suffer because I spent 6 months failing to pay attention to things that deserved it. Silence around the table. Richard Hale leaned forward slightly. Daniel, what we need from you is assurance, concrete assurance, not just words the investors need to see a plan, a restructuring of focus. Some of them are suggesting that a co-CEO arrangement might— No, Daniel said, cleanly, without anger. I hear the concern and I take it seriously, and I'll give you the plan. But I built this company, and I am going to be the one who leads it through this. If that's not acceptable to the board, we'll have a different conversation. But that's where I stand. Sandra Kim, who had been quiet through all of this, spoke for the first time. Daniel, she said, and her voice was measured and precise in the way of someone who chooses words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. I've been on this board for 18 months. In that time, I've watched you run this company with more drive and intelligence than most people bring to anything. I've also watched you make decisions that suggested you believed you were immune to consequences. She looked at him directly. What I'm hearing today sounds different. It sounds like someone who has had a genuine reckoning. If that's real, not performed, not strategic, but real, then I think you have the ability to lead this company out of the current situation. But the board needs to believe it's real. How do we prove it's real? Daniel asked. You already started, she said. You came in here and told the truth. Most people in your position would have come in with spin. You didn't. A pause. Keep doing that. With us, with your team, with the investors. People can tell the difference. The board meeting ended without a vote of no confidence. It ended with a list of deliverables, a restructured quarterly plan, a performance review in 60 days, a more transparent communication framework with the investors, and with the implicit understanding that Daniel Crawford was on a timeline that he had not previously operated under. He had always been the man who set the timelines for others. Now he was on someone else's. He drove home that evening and he sat at his kitchen table and he did not open his laptop. He thought about what Sandra Kim had said. People can tell the difference. He had spent 12 years in business learning to perform authenticity, to speak in the language of sincerity, because sincerity was effective because it closed deals and built trust and moved people where he needed them to go. He had been very good at it, so good that he had sometimes lost track of where the performance ended and the real thing began. I was finding the real thing now, not because he had become a better person overnight, but because the cost of the performance had finally exceeded what he was willing to pay. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was Victoria. He stared at the name for a long moment. Then he answered. Victoria. "I know you're probably angry," she said. Her voice was different, careful, stripped of the ease and warmth that had characterized everything between them. I needed to explain." "You gave a declaration to Claire's attorney." "Yes." "Why?" A pause that was not a hesitation but a gathering. "Because she called me. Did you know that Claire called me? Not her attorney, Claire herself. She called me and she asked me to have a conversation with her. And I thought she was going to be furious or threatening or—" She stopped. "She wasn't any of those things. She just talked to me, like a person. She told me about Noah, about the hospital nights, about the years." Another pause. "And I realized that the story you told me was not the whole story, that I had been part of something I didn't fully understand. And I thought that if I were her, I would want to know the truth from the one person who could confirm it." Daniel was quiet. "She didn't ask me to do it," Victoria said. "She didn't ask me for anything. She told me the truth and she trusted me to do what I thought was right with it. And I—" Her voice shifted, something uncertain moving through it. "I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be." "Okay," Daniel said. "That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say, Victoria?" "I don't know. I thought you'd be angrier." "I was," he said, "for about a day. And then I thought about what you actually did, and I couldn't stay angry. You told the truth. You made a choice that cost you something and didn't benefit you, and you made it anyway because you thought it was right." He paused. "That's more than I did for most of my marriage." Silence on the line. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked, and her voice was quieter now, the easy warmth gone, replaced by something more honest and more limited. "Yeah," he said. "I think so. Are you—" A pause. "I think I need to make some different choices," she said, "about who I spend my time with, about what I settle for." Another pause. "I think I've been settling." "You deserve better than what I gave you," Daniel said. "I want you to know I know that." They said goodbye without making it into anything more than it was. No drama, no recrimination. Two people who had been in each other's lives for reasons that neither of them was entirely proud of, having an honest conversation about it on the way out, which was more grace than most situations like theirs received. He put the phone down. I thought about Claire calling Victoria. Claire picking up the phone and calling the other woman, not to confront, not to accuse, not to perform her pain, but to tell the truth and trust the other person to do something real with it. He thought about the kind of strength that required, the kind of strength that does not announce itself, that does not need an audience, that simply does the right thing because the right thing needs to be done and there is no one else in the room to do it. He had been surrounded by that kind of strength for 11 years and had mistaken it for something smaller. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday evening that was his regular midweek time with Noah, Daniel picked his son up from Claire's rental house for the first time. He had not been inside. He waited at the curb the way the agreement specified, and Noah came out with his backpack and the unzipped jacket that he always wore unzipped regardless of temperature, a habit that drove Claire mildly insane, and that Daniel was only just learning was a habit. They went for pizza, a place near Daniel's house that Noah had picked from a list Daniel had texted him because Daniel was learning to let Noah make choices, learning that it mattered to the kid more than he would have predicted to be consulted, to be asked rather than told. Halfway through dinner, Noah put down his slice and said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you and Mom going to be mad at each other forever?" Daniel set down his own slice. He looked at his son, the serious face, the eyes that were measuring something, the careful, watchful intelligence of a child who has been paying attention to adult behavior for longer than anyone realized. "No," Daniel said, "we're not going to be mad at each other forever." "But you're not going to live together again," Noah said. Not a question. "No," Daniel said, "we're not." Noah nodded, slowly processing. "Okay," he said. Then, "Marcus at school, his parents got divorced and they're always fighting when they pick him up. It makes him really upset." "That's hard," Daniel said. "Yeah." Noah picked up his pizza again. "I don't want that." "Me neither," Daniel said. "And I can't promise you that things will always be easy, but I can promise you that I'm going to try really hard not to let that happen. Your mom and I, we both love you. That part is not complicated." Noah considered this with the solemn deliberation of someone filing an important piece of information. "Okay," he said again. And then because he was 10 and the emotional weight of the conversation had reached its natural limit, "Can I get a calzone next time?" "Absolutely," Daniel said. Noah grinned and went back to his pizza, and Daniel sat across from him and watched his son eat and felt something that he did not have an easy word for. Not happiness exactly. Things were too complicated and too recent for straightforward happiness. But something adjacent to it. Something that had to do with being in the right place, doing the right thing in the actual present moment, without an agenda or an exit strategy or a phone call he was half thinking about. Just here. Just this. In the 6th week after the hearing, Daniel did something he had been putting off. He called Claire's mother. Margaret Bennett, who was 68 years old and had never liked Daniel with the particular thoroughness of a mother who saw clearly what her daughter was going through and loved her daughter enough to stay quiet about it for years. She had stayed quiet because Claire asked her to, because Claire was private and proud and did not want her marriage discussed, and because Margaret respected her daughter enough to follow her lead. Margaret answered on the 3rd ring and said, "Daniel," in a voice that contained all 11 years of things she had kept to herself. "Margaret, I know you don't have any reason to want to talk to me." "No," she said, "I don't. I called because I wanted to say something to you, not to fix anything, just to say it. Claire spent 11 years in a marriage where I did not show up the way I should have. And during those 11 years you watched that happen, and you kept quiet because she asked you to, and you kept showing up for her and for Noah in every way I didn't. I know that, and I want to thank you for it, because someone had to, and you did, every time." Silence. "Daniel," Margaret said, and her voice had changed, not warmed exactly, but opened slightly, the way a window opens a crack, without fully letting in the outside. "I'm not asking you to think better of me," he said. She needed someone, and you were there, and I should have been there. I wasn't, but you were, and that matters." Margaret was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was slower, more careful. "My daughter is stronger than she looks. She always has been, but it cost her. You understand that every year that she held everything together cost her something she is not going to get back." "I know," Daniel said. "Good," she said. "Don't forget it." She hung up. He did not forget it. The 60-day board review arrived with the speed of something that was always coming even when you were not watching the calendar. Daniel walked into that second board meeting a different man than the one who had sat at the end of the table 2 months earlier. Not different in the dramatic, declarative way of people who announce their transformations, but different in the quieter, more durable way of someone who has changed their actual behavior and is letting the evidence accumulate. The numbers were better, not spectacular, a genuine recovery from the Q3 position, the beginning of a direction that the investors could read as intentional. He had restructured 2 underperforming divisions, made 3 executive hires that Sandra Kim had flagged as strong, and had implemented the communication framework the board had requested. He had been present. He had returned calls. He had attended the meetings he said he would attend, and he had been on time for all of them. He had also, every Wednesday evening, picked up his son for dinner. Every other Saturday, Noah came to his house. They had finished the model airplane. It was sitting on the shelf in the room Daniel had cleared, and quietly begun to make into something Noah might want to spend time in. Sandra Kim presented the review. She went through the metrics. She noted the changes. She noted also, in the measured language of someone who chooses every word, that the quality of leadership engagement over the past 60 days had been qualitatively different from the preceding period. Richard Hale said, "I think we're in a better position than we were." No one disagreed. After the meeting, Sandra Kim stopped Daniel in the hallway. She was carrying her bag and her tablet, already moving toward the elevator, a woman who did not waste time. "The real test," she said, not slowing down, "is not the next 60 days. It's the next 2 years. Sustainable change looks different from crisis response. Make sure you know which one this is." "I know," Daniel said. She looked at him. One of those clear, direct assessments that he had learned to receive without flinching. "Yes," she said. "I think you do." And she got in the elevator. He stood in the hallway of his company for a moment. 14th floor. The building he had chosen for its view, its address. All the things he had selected in his life for what they communicated to people looking in from the outside. He thought about Claire's rental house, which he had not been inside, but had seen from the curb, smaller than what she'd had, quieter, a neighborhood where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved from porches. He thought about Noah coming out of that house every Wednesday with his unzipped jacket and his backpack, looking more settled than he had looked in the hospital. More at ease. The anxiety episodes at school had decreased. The counselor Amy Delgado had sent Claire a note, which Claire had forwarded to Daniel through the co-parenting app that said Noah had been more engaged, more present, less withdrawn. Claire's house was smaller. Daniel's was larger. Noah moved between them on a schedule, carrying a backpack that had some things from each place, navigating two worlds with the adaptability of a child who has decided bravely, without being asked, to trust that both worlds are safe. He was making his world safe, one Wednesday at a time, one Saturday at a time, one honest conversation, one kept promise, one unignored phone call at a time. I thought about what Claire had said in the coffee shop. The boring days, the days where nothing dramatic is happening and you could be somewhere more interesting, and you choose to be there anyway. He was learning to love the boring days. He was learning that the boring days were not the space between the things that mattered. The boring days were the thing. They had always been the thing. He had just taken 11 years to understand it. I took the elevator down. He walked through the lobby of the building he had built. He got in his car. He drove home at an ordinary speed, obeying traffic signals, not on the phone, not mentally, at the next meeting. He drove home the way a man drives home when home is actually where he is going. And when he got there, he opened the door and walked into the quiet. And instead of feeling the oppressive weight of absence, he felt something he was still getting used to feeling in his own company. Peace, small, new, earned, not yet complete, but undeniably real. He sat at the kitchen table. He opened his laptop, not for work, not for the inbox, not for any of the machinery of the life he had been running for so long, he'd forgotten why he started. He opened it because Noah had mentioned a book his class was reading, and Daniel had looked it up and bought a copy, and he wanted to read the first chapter before Saturday so that when Noah wanted to talk about it, he would be ready. He would be ready. He was learning slowly and imperfectly, and with the full weight of everything he had cost himself and others, what it meant to be ready. The 12-month review came on a Thursday. Daniel had marked it in his calendar the same day he marked the first visitation date back when he was still standing in the courthouse hallway with the paperwork in his hands and the weight of everything he'd conceded pressing down on him. He had looked at both dates the first Saturday, with Noah the 12-month review, and understood that they were connected. That one would determine the other. That the review was not a legal formality, but a report card. And the subject being graded was not his company performance or his net worth or any of the metrics he had spent his career perfecting. The subject was whether Daniel Crawford had become, in 12 months, a man his son could count on. He drove to Marcus's office on a gray Seattle morning and sat across from his attorney in the same chair he had sat in a year ago when Marcus had laid out 63 pages of documented failures on the desk between them. The desk between them was clear today. Marcus looked different too. Not younger, not more relaxed, but something in his bearing had shifted in the way that happens when a professional has watched a client either rise or fall over a long period and has arrived at a conclusion. He opened a folder. He looked at Daniel over the top of it. "The modification petition goes before Judge Okafor in 3 weeks," Marcus said. "I want to walk you through what we're presenting, because Daniel, what we're presenting is significant." He laid out the documentation. 52 Wednesday evenings attended without a single cancellation. 26 alternating weekends complete. 14 school events, not just the ones that were convenient, not just the baseball games and the science fair, but the ordinary ones, the ones that nobody's professional reputation was enhanced by attending. A Tuesday afternoon recorder concert. A Thursday morning classroom volunteer session that Daniel had shown up to in jeans because he had come directly from dropping Noah off at school and had not had time to change. A parent-teacher conference in October where Noah's teacher, a young woman named Ms. Farrell, who had been teaching 5th grade for 3 years and who had a very good eye for which parents were actually paying attention and which ones were performing attention, had said, "Noah is doing so much better this year. He seems more settled, more confident. I don't know what changed at home, but whatever it is, keep doing it." Daniel had kept doing it. There were also 3 documented medical appointments. Not emergencies, those still went through. Claire still fell within her domain as they should. These were the routine ones. The annual physical that Claire had tentatively through the co-parenting app suggested Daniel might want to attend. The follow-up with Dr. Reeves. The dentist visit that nobody wanted to take Noah to because Noah hated the dentist with a passionate theatrical loathing that he got from Daniel's side of the family. Daniel had taken him to all three. He had sat in the waiting room at Dr. Reeves's office and learned for the first time the full picture of his son's respiratory condition, not from a summary, not from a legal document, but from the doctor directly listening as Dr. Reeves explained the triggers and the management and the long-term outlook and what to watch for and what to do at 2 in the morning if the inhaler wasn't working fast enough. He had taken notes on his phone. He had asked follow-up questions. Dr. Reeves had looked at him with the particular expression of a physician who has seen parents disappear and reappear and has learned to withhold judgment until the pattern is clear and had said, "It's good that you're here." 3 words, the same weight as Noah's 3 words at the hospital a year ago. "Thanks for calling. It was good that he was there. He was there." Marcus finished walking him through the file and looked at Daniel with something that was not quite professional satisfaction, but contained elements of it. "The petition is for expanded visitation," Marcus said. 3 weekends per month instead of 2 plus an additional weekday evening. "And we're asking for unsupervised medical decision-making authority in non-emergency situations when Noah is in your care." He paused. "Claire's attorney has indicated that Claire will not contest the modification." Daniel looked up. "She's not contesting it." "No." Marcus allowed himself a small, precise smile. "Rebecca Torres sent over a letter last week. Claire has reviewed the record of the past 12 months, and she is not opposing the expansion." He closed the folder. "She also included a note, not legal language, a personal note." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Daniel picked it up. The handwriting was Claire's. He recognized it immediately, the neat, slightly compressed letters, the way she always wrote her lowercase t's with a small crossbar that tilted slightly upward. It said, "The man who showed up this year is the man I thought I was marrying. I'm glad Noah gets to know him. C." Daniel read it twice. He put it down on the desk carefully as if it were something fragile. He did not say anything for a moment because he was a man who had spent his entire adult life maintaining the appearance of composure in professional settings, and this was a professional setting, and he was not going to lose that composure in Marcus Webb's office. "I was not going to." He came very close. "Okay," he said finally, and his voice was even. "Okay," Marcus said, and looked out the window for a moment to give Daniel the gift of not being watched. 3 weeks later, he stood before Judge Patricia Okafor for the second time. The courtroom was the same room, the same ordinary dimensions, the same fluorescent light, the same smell of institutional carpet and old paper. Daniel stood in it and remembered standing in it 12 months ago, and the distance between the 2 moments felt enormous, not because the external circumstances were dramatically different, but because the person occupying the circumstances had shifted in ways that were harder to measure, but no less real. Judge Okafor looked at the file. She looked at Daniel. She looked at Claire, who was sitting across the aisle again this time, without the defended, fortified stillness she had carried in the first hearing. She looked more settled today, more at ease in the room, like someone who had made a difficult decision a year ago and had watched it prove itself out. "I've reviewed the documentation submitted for the modification petition," Judge Okafor said. "I've also reviewed Ms. Bennett's response, including her indication that she does not oppose the modification." She looked at both of them in turn. "In my experience, unopposed modification petitions at the 12-month mark are relatively uncommon. They suggest something that contested proceedings rarely produce a genuine functioning co-parenting relationship. I want to acknowledge that because it doesn't happen by accident. It happens because both parties make a deliberate choice repeatedly to put the child's interest above their own." She paused. "The modification is granted." She said it simply, no flourish, no dramatic declaration, just the words clean and unadorned the way the truest things usually are. Daniel exhaled. In the hallway afterward, Claire was talking with Rebecca Torres near the elevator. Daniel waited until they were done, and then he walked over, and Torres, reading the room, with the practiced instinct of a lawyer who has seen thousands of these moments, excused herself and stepped away. Daniel and Claire stood facing each other in the courthouse hallway. It was the 3rd time they had faced each other here. The first time he had not yet understood what he had cost her. The second time he was beginning to. The 3rd time they were standing in the aftermath of something that had been rebuilt, not restored, not returned to what it was, but rebuilt into something new, something that had not existed before, something that was not a marriage and not a friendship and not an enmity, but a collaboration in the service of someone they both loved completely. "Thank you," Daniel said, "for the note and for not contesting." Claire looked at him steadily. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it for Noah." "I know," he said. "That's why it meant something." Something moved across her face. The complexity of it, the grief and the history, and the guarded, reluctant recognition of genuine change was visible for just a moment before she assembled it back into composure. "He's excited about the expanded weekends," she said. "He told me last night that you two are going to start building a model car next." "He picked it out," Daniel said. "He spent 45 minutes on the website choosing." For the first time in all the times they had stood across from each other in the past year, Claire smiled. Not the careful, managed expression she had offered him in their harder conversations. A real smile, brief and genuine, the one he remembered from before, from when things were simpler, and he had been too careless to understand how rare it was. "He's going to have very strong opinions about which model," she said. "He already does," Daniel said. "He sent me a voice memo explaining why a 1967 Shelby Mustang is objectively superior to every other option." Claire laughed. Brief, quiet, but real. Then the moment passed, the way. Real moments do not with a dramatic fade-out, but with the natural ending of something that has given what it had to give. She looked at her watch. She said she needed to get back. She had a meeting, she had a job, now had been back in the workforce for 8 months, working for an environmental consulting firm that valued exactly the kind of organized, detail-oriented competence she had spent 11 years applying to their household. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. She had just spent a decade applying it to a context that had not recognized its value. "Tell Noah I'll pick him up Sunday at 6, Daniel said. "I will," she said. She walked toward the elevator. He watched her go, the woman he had married, the woman he had failed, the woman who had rebuilt herself so completely and so quietly that the rebuilding itself was its own kind of extraordinary. She did not look back. He did not need her to. The Saturday after the court modification, Noah arrived at Daniel's house with a printed web page. He had gone to the library. Claire had taken him another of the small, coordinated gestures that characterized the way they were learning to operate around each other, and he had printed out detailed specifications for the 1967 Shelby Mustang model kit, annotated in Noah's handwriting in green marker, with stars next to the parts he was most interested in. "I did research," Noah said, holding out the papers with the gravity of a scientist presenting findings. Daniel took the papers and read them with the full seriousness they deserved. "This is thorough," he said. "Did you know the original Shelby had a 428 cubic inch engine?" Noah stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I did research too," Daniel said. Noah's face broke into a grin so wide and unguarded that it made Daniel's chest ache in the best possible way. "You looked it up," Noah said. "Dad, you looked it up." "Of course I did. You sent me a voice memo. I wasn't going to show up unprepared." Noah launched into a detailed explanation of everything he had learned about the Shelby Mustang, and Daniel listened. And they ordered the kit online, and then they ate lunch, and then they went to the batting cage because Noah had a baseball game the following weekend and wanted to practice. And Daniel stood behind the cage and watched his son swing at pitch after pitch and felt the specific joy of being present for the ordinary progression of a child's afternoon. This was the life. Not the version he had imagined from a hotel in Miami, some abstract future where everything was arranged perfectly and ran smoothly and required nothing difficult from him. The actual life, the one with burned pancakes and printed research papers, and a kid who was deeply personally invested in the specifications of a 1967 Shelby Mustang, the one that asked everything of him and gave back more. It was in the 6th week after the modification that the thing happened that Daniel had not prepared for, because he had prepared for many things in the past year, but had not prepared for this. How was it Noah's baseball game? A Saturday afternoon, the kind that happens at fields where parents line both sides in folding chairs, and the kids are in mismatched uniforms because the league is recreational, and the point is not to win, but to play. Daniel was in his folding chair on the third base side, where he had learned to sit because Noah played shortstop, and the angle was better, and he had his coffee and his phone in his pocket and his full attention on the field. He had been there for 6 innings when he noticed the man sitting 3 chairs down. He had not noticed him arrive. The man was perhaps 45, unremarkable, in the way of fathers at recreational baseball games, wearing a team sweatshirt and holding a paper cup of coffee. He was watching the game with the distracted, slightly guilty expression of someone who is physically present and mentally somewhere else. His phone was in his hand. He had been looking at it for most of the 3 innings Daniel had been aware of him. His kid Daniel had watched the lineup. It was the boy playing first base, number 12, had made a good play in the 5th inning and looked toward the stands searching, and the man had been looking at his phone and had missed it. The boy's face, when he realized his father hadn't seen it, was a specific expression that Daniel recognized from the inside out. He had worn that face on his own son's face for years. He did not say anything to the man. It was not his place, and he was not the kind of person who offered unrequested life lessons. But he sat there for the rest of the game, and he watched the man with his phone, and he watched the boy glancing toward the stands, and he felt something that was not smugness or judgment, but its opposite, a deep, clear-eyed sorrow for the version of himself that had been that man, and a grief for all the boys whose fathers were that man, and a gratitude so specific and complete. It was almost physical for the fact that he had barely at enormous cost with help. He had not deserved found his way out of it. After the game, Noah ran off the field still wearing his glove and went straight to Daniel, which he had started doing this direct beeline from the field. And Daniel had not said anything about it because he did not want to make it self-conscious, did not want to draw attention to it in a way that might make Noah realize he was doing something and therefore stop. "We won," Noah said. "I know, I saw. You had a great play in the 3rd. The ball took a weird hop. You adjusted. That's the hard part." Noah considered this with the seriousness he brought to athletic analysis. Then, "Dad, can we go to that taco place? The one with the hot sauce you're not supposed to put on everything, but you put on everything." "Yeah, absolutely." They walked to the car together, Noah still in his uniform, still wearing his glove on one hand, because he always kept it on after games. A habit Daniel had not known about a year ago, and now found completely characteristic, as specific and recognizable as a fingerprint. In the car driving to the taco place, Noah said, without preamble, the way kids say the most important things casually between other things without warning, "Dad, I'm glad you come to my games." Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "Me too, buddy." "Marcus's dad never comes," Noah said. "Marcus says he's always working." A pause. "That's hard for Marcus," Daniel said. "Yeah." Noah was quiet for a moment. "I used to think you were always working too. Like it was just like that's just how dads were." Daniel felt the weight of that sentence settle over him like something heavy and true. "It's not how dads have to be," he said carefully. "I know," Noah said. "You're different now." He said it with the simplicity of a child stating a fact, not forgiving, not accusing, observing. "You're just different." "Is that okay?" Daniel asked. Noah looked at him with those eyes that were so completely Claire's and so completely his own. "Yeah, Dad," he said. "It's really okay." They ate tacos. Noah put hot sauce on everything. Daniel did not comment on the hot sauce because some battles are not worth fighting, and also because watching his kid eat with complete unself-conscious enthusiasm for the exact flavor combination he loved was one of the small private pleasures of fatherhood that Daniel was only now learning to notice. The twist came on a Tuesday evening in November, 8 weeks after the modification, and it came from a direction Daniel had not anticipated. His phone rang at 8:15. He had just dropped Noah back at Claire's and was driving home replaying the dinner conversation in his head. Noah had started reading a new book and wanted to describe the entire plot to Daniel in precise detail, including aspects of the plot that had not yet happened, but that Noah had extrapolated from foreshadowing when his phone connected through the car speakers and the name on the screen made him inhale sharply. Claire. Not the co-parenting app. Not a text. A direct call. Claire. "Hi." Her voice was even, but there was something underneath it. Something he had learned over years of knowing her to recognize as the controlled surface over genuine emotion. "I need to tell you something. Not about the custody arrangement. Not about Noah. About—" She stopped. "I got a job offer today. A good one. A firm in Portland. Senior position project lead, the kind of role I was on track for before I left my career." Another stop. "It's significant, Daniel. It's the kind of thing I thought I might never have access to again." I understood immediately what she was not yet saying. "Portland," he said. "Yes." Portland was 170 miles away. He pulled the car over. He sat on the side of the road in the dark, and he thought about what this meant for the schedule for Noah, for the co-parenting structure they had spent a year carefully building, and he felt the instinctive selfish contraction of someone whose arrangement is about to change. And then he felt something else, something larger override it. "Claire," he said, "how do you feel about it? Not what it means for the schedule. How do you feel about the offer?" Silence. A longer one. "I feel like it's the first time in a very long time that someone has looked at what I can actually do and offered me something commensurate with it," she said. I feel like I want to say yes, but I don't know what that means for Noah. And I don't know what that means for— "Tell me about the role," he said. She told him. She talked for 10 minutes about the firm, about the position, about the project she would be leading. And as she talked, her voice changed, the careful evenness, giving way to something more alive, more energized, the voice of a person describing something they genuinely want. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not do the mental calculation that a year ago he would have begun immediately, the one where he assessed how her choices affected his own situation. He listened to her voice come alive, and he thought, this is what it sounds like when someone gets back what was taken from them. "You should take it," he said. Silence. "Daniel. Claire, you gave up your career for our family. You gave it up, and you ran everything, and you held everything together for 11 years, and you deserve to have the thing that makes your voice sound the way it just sounded when you were describing that job. You should take it." The logistics. "We'll figure out the logistics. Noah can do extended stays during school breaks. We can do long weekends. We can use video calls for the in-between. We'll build a schedule that works. It'll take some adjusting, but we'll figure it out." He paused. "It is not your job to shrink your life so that my schedule stays convenient. It hasn't been that for a long time. Take the job, Claire." Another long silence. When she spoke, her voice was different. Not soft. Claire did not do soft in the way of people who have had to be strong for too long to remember soft as an option. But something had moved in it. Something had shifted. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not suspicious, genuinely asking. "Because it's right," he said, and because he started again. "You spent 11 years making your life smaller so mine could be bigger. The least I can do is make sure that's over." She was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. Then, "I'm going to think about it." "That's all I'm asking," he said. She took the job. She told him 2 days later through the co-parenting app, first the formal channel, the one they had built to protect Noah from the direct current of their adult decisions, and then with a brief text to his personal number that just said, "I said yes, thank you for what you said." He read that text 4 times. I thought about the man who had flown to Miami and laughed and ordered champagne and come home to an empty house and sat on the kitchen floor in a $3,000 suit. He thought about what that man had understood about the woman he'd married, about her capacity and her strength and her right to a full life. He had not understood any of it. He understood it now. The last conversation happened in early December on a Sunday evening when Daniel returned Noah after a weekend that had included the completion of the Shelby Mustang model kit, 41 pieces, 2 sessions, one argument about whether the front grille was correctly attached that turned out to be Daniel who was wrong, and a trip to the batting cages, and a movie that Noah had chosen, and that Daniel had sat through with complete, genuine attention, even though it was an animated film about a dog, and it was not aimed at a 43-year-old man, and he had cried at the end, which he did not tell Noah, and which Noah absolutely noticed. He pulled up to Claire's house. Noah grabbed his backpack. He was halfway out of the car when he stopped and turned back and looked at Daniel with an expression that was specific and serious, in the way that meant he had been thinking about something for a while. "Dad," he said, "are you happy?" Daniel looked at his son. The question was so direct, so completely characteristically Noah the kid who went straight to the thing, who did not dress up what he meant, who had been watching his father for 2 years with the attentive, careful eyes of someone trying to understand what he was seeing. "Yeah," Daniel said. "I am. Like actually. He held his son's gaze. "Are you?" Noah considered this with his characteristic deliberation. Then he nodded, slowly but without hesitation. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." He got out of the car. He was halfway up the front path when he turned back one more time. "Dad, next weekend can we do the batting cage again, and can you pitch this time instead of the machine you've been practicing, right?" Daniel had in fact been practicing. specifically because Noah had mentioned 3 weeks ago that he preferred facing a real pitcher because the machine was too predictable, and Daniel had immediately looked up batting practice pitching techniques and had been throwing into a net in his backyard 4 times a week since. "Yeah," he said, "I've been practicing." Noah's face did the thing, the grin, the bright, unself-conscious one. "Okay," he said, "don't embarrass yourself." He ran up the path and knocked on the door, and Claire opened it, and before she could say anything, Noah said, "Mom, Dad's been practicing pitching. He's probably terrible, but he says he's not," and disappeared inside. And Claire stood in the doorway for a moment, and she looked at Daniel's car at the curb, and she shook her head with the expression of someone who is trying not to smile and is not entirely succeeding. She raised one hand, a small wave, brief, unceremonious. He raised one back. She went inside. He sat in his car in front of the house where his son lived and where his ex-wife was building a life that was honest and full and entirely her own, and he sat with the particular quality of that moment, the ordinary Sunday evening, end-of-a-weekend quality of it, and he understood that this was what he had been building toward without knowing it. Not the corner office or the company valuation or the hotel in Miami. This. The ability to sit in a car at the end of an ordinary Sunday and feel without qualification that he had been exactly where he was supposed to be all weekend. He had not taken anything for granted today. He had not been somewhere else in his mind. He had been there, entirely unglamorously, completely there. For the model car and the batting cage and the animated movie about the dog and the argument about the front grille and the conversation in the car on the way home about whether the Mariners had a realistic shot next season, which Noah had strong opinions about. He had been there for all of it. He started the car. He drove home through the Sunday evening traffic of a city full of people making their way back to their ordinary lives, and he did not feel the urge to be somewhere more interesting, more significant, more worthy of the person he had told himself he was. He felt for the first time in as long as he could remember that ordinary was exactly enough. Because here was the truth that Daniel Crawford had paid for, with the hardest 2 years of his life, the truth that had cost him his marriage and his control and his certainty and his comfortable self-image, and very nearly his son. The life that matters is not the one you build for other people to see. It is the one you show up for when no one is watching. It is the burned pancake on Saturday morning, and the printed research papers, and the batting practice in the backyard, and the animated movie about the dog, and the moment when your son asks if you are happy and you tell him yes, actually, and both of you know you mean it. Daniel Crawford had everything he needed to learn that lesson. It just took losing everything else first.